Alright, so hello and welcome back. So today we're going to check out the Channel Dash by Baz Battles, okay? It's a pretty good idea of what happened here. And also, if you have not seen the last episode we did, you can click up right over there, the Battle of Kuntan, where the British lost two capital ships, alright? So I'll leave the original link in the description to go check out the video, because this commentary will probably be over 30-something minutes, because I like to make videos long, alright? Let's get to it.
It is the cold winter evening of the 11th of February, 1942. Dozens of German sailors bustle around aboard the German fast battleship Scharnhorst, ensuring the vessel is ready for an upcoming mission. The commander of the entire battle group, Vice Admiral Otto Ziliaks, leans over the handrail on the ship's bridge to check the preparations on the similar battleship moored just a few hundred meters away. The Gneisenau was being fueled and loaded with necessary equipment. It seemed that within the next 2 or 3 hours, the group will be ready to finally depart the port of Brest. One of the most risky missions in naval history is about to begin. It's the 1st of June, 1941. Appearing out of the morning mist, the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen enters the safe harbor of the German-occupied port of Brest to undergo much-needed engine repairs. Not a week ago, she parted ways with the damaged battleship Bismarck, which was soon compelled to fight her last battle against the overwhelming pursuit of the British Royal Navy. The demise of the Bismarck, one of the two newest and most powerful warships of the Kriegsmarine, led the German Naval Command to rethink the role of their biggest naval vessels in the ongoing Battle of the Atlantic.
If you haven't seen that video, I'll put a card up there. But yeah, so again, Prince Eugen was saved from the fate that befell Bismarck. Actually, she will be the only German ship that I know of that will be recommissioned into the United States Navy as USS Prince Eugen to be subsequently blown up in a nuclear bomb test. So there's that.
In the summer of the year 1941, the Kriegsmarine had 3 serviceable capital ships at their command. The second craft of the Bismarck class, the Tirpitz, was finishing crew training in Kiel, and the 2 smaller fast battleships, referred to as battle cruisers by the British, the Scharnhorst and her sister ship, the Gneisenau, both undergoing repairs in the port of Brest.
So I'll just tell you why the British refer to them as battle cruisers, okay? Well, and why they actually are battleships. So the British refer to them as battle cruisers because, one, they go very fast. Okay, for battleships, they actually go faster than the King George V class of battleships. Okay, at 28.5 knots is their max speed, 32 knots for Gneisenau and Scharnhorst. Okay, so they go pretty fast. Number 2, they have 11-inch guns. Okay, so usually a battle cruiser is equipped with guns that can fight everything that's not a battleship. So 11-inch guns do that. They kill everything, including heavy cruisers and carriers, that they can kill, but they can't actually hurt a battleship, okay? Now, they were originally supposed to not have those guns. They were supposed to have 15-inch guns, right? They never got those. But they're supposed to have actually, I think, the same guns as the Tirpitz, right? 15 or 16-inch guns put onto them to, actually be battleships. However, they didn't. So they had these 11-inch guns. So these 11-inch guns were not very effective at actually going to be shooting at other battleships. I wouldn't necessarily say they would bounce off the battleships. They just wouldn't do as severe damage to them if they hit. But they would still do damage because these are 11-inch guns, okay? Another thing, they had the armor layout of a battleship, just like the Tirpitz did. But the British, labeled them as battle cruisers, might have thought that they had battle cruiser armor, which means if that a battleship hit a battle cruiser goes boom. That's not the case with these battleships. If these battleships get hit, they have the armor to withstand other battleships. They just can't deal the damage. So let's summarize. They're faster than the British battleships. They have lower guns, right? So they're less gunned, but they have the armor of a battleship. So therefore, 2 out of 3 things would probably say that they're battleships. But the British thought they were battle cruisers because fast and low gun, right? They didn't know about the big armor.
Each of these 3 warships presented a serious threat to Allied merchant convoys steaming through the Atlantic, and their very existence tied down a good portion of the British home fleet, whose main task was to keep the shipping lanes free of the German menace. In order to at least partially contain the potential of the Kriegsmarine, The British Royal Air Force was assigned with the mission of bombing warships anchored in German-controlled ports, in the hope to put them out of commission for as long as possible. These air raids proved to be rather ineffective in the case of the Tirpitz, as she was a relatively hard target located deep into the southwestern Baltic coast. But the other two battleships, moored at Brest Harbour, were subject to an almost constant barrage of bombing sorties flown by the Royal Air Force.
Because it's basically right next to England. That's why. Now, an unintended side effect, as was mentioned earlier, the British home fleet had to keep units in two different places. Okay, they were tying down massive amounts of forces. The Germans were by basically having battleships in two places. This is an unintended consequence. Okay, it's not like they planned that. So the British have to have units in the North Sea to deal with the Tirpitz. They also have to have units in the East Atlantic nearer the Gneisenau now in Scharnhorst in case they launch a raid to go do convoy missions. They have to keep fleet forces there. So they have to. And again, you don't want to fight like a one-for-one fight, right? You want to have as many ships on your side as possible because you don't fight even fights. So that means with the British, if there's two ships here, the British are going to have to bring 4 capital ships to deal with these. If there's one here, they're going to need at least 2 capital ships to deal with these, at a minimum. And disregarding all the aircraft and the support ships on top of that, right? So this unintentionally is actually tying down a significant portion of Royal Navy resources. If the Tirpitz, and this is a hypothetical, if the Tirpitz actually went to Brest, that would put all the capital ship units where the British knew where they were. So that means the entire home fleet could be moved and relocated to basically deal with this threat. But because they are in 2 different places, they have to split their fleet.
Of course, these were dangerous missions for the bomber crews, performed usually at night and against heavy anti-aircraft defenses around the port facilities, with small, barely visible targets. So it rarely yielded any significant results. But the sheer amount of attacks flown by the British were enough to keep the German warships out of service for a good part of 1941. The German Naval Command under Grand Admiral Erich Raeder had a tough nut to crack. The fate of the Bismarck and the manner in which the British were able to track the battleship down in the Atlantic with the help of their superior radar highlighted the risk the Kriegsmarine had to consider while planning Atlantic service ship sorties against merchant convoys. The demise of the Bismarck convinced the Führer that all of his major vessels were little more than costly luxuries, especially closer to the end of 1941, when the Wehrmacht was enduring the first strains on the new front opened against the Soviet Union earlier that year. The idea of bringing the 3 warships from Brest back to home waters took hold when the British made a number of raids on German-occupied Norway, which made Hitler realize that the Scandinavian country could become a target for Allied invasion. Based on this, the Tirpitz was moved to the Norwegian fjords to both strengthen the German defenses there and also to attain a good forward base to harass Arctic convoys bound for the Soviet Union.
Now, you could see how that could be very appealing to Adolf Hitler, right? And that's also why the Tirpitz is actually called the Lonely Queen in the North, or the nickname, right? The Lonely Queen in the North, because she was the only battleship up there. For a while. We'll get to what actually happens here at the Channel Dash where they get out. But you can see that having these units, these heavy units in 2 different locations might not be beneficial for Germany, considering they basically don't have that many capitals at all. Really, they have 3. That's it. So if they were able to relocate Prince Eugen, Scharnhorst, and Gneisenau all the way back to Kiel and then all the way up to Norway, that could pose a serious threat to Allied merchants going to the Soviet Union, right? If that entire squadron sailed out, those are all modern ships. Whatever force ran into that is going to have a big fight on their hands.
To harass Arctic convoys bound for the Soviet Union. The warships in Brest were to follow the same patrol, but the question remained how to safely move them back home unscathed. Now, Raeder and the other high-ranked Kriegsmarine officers staunchly opposed this idea, as there was literally no safe way to reposition the warships at Brest back to Germany. Every pass around Iceland or the Faroe Islands was fraught with danger, and the only other option, pushing through the English Channel, was absolute lunacy, a suicide mission.
I will tell you why each of these routes was located, okay? So, Route 1, probably the safest option. Go all the way around Iceland and all the way up into the North Sea, all the way to Norway, okay? This leaves the British very little time to intercept you because their main forces are at very good Scapa Flow. However, if they see you at any point in this. They can do an intercept course because they'll probably know where you're going, and they also occupy Iceland now, so they have aircraft stationed there to spot you. So it's risky. Number two, go for the short way. You break here and then go to Norway. The problem is, if you do this, the Scapa Flow fleet, the home fleet, will be able to intercept you with everything. There's also Iceland scout aircraft and the Faroe Islands out here pose a threat because they can have a scout aircraft as well that will spot you to be intercepted, right? Then you have the absolute lunatic option, which is sail through the channel. Okay? Doing that is absolutely insane. Why? Well, for starters, it could be mined. Second, there could be torpedo boats that will come out to destroy you. Third, you have aircraft that are literally based on the coastline to intercept anything like this. Fourth, if you do this, any ships in the area should intercept you, and they know where you're going and they know where you are. And there is absolutely no room to maneuver here in the English Strait, especially down here near Calais. So that's why it's a lunacy to try that. And also, coastal artillery. I know that's not a term that's used very often, but there's coastal artillery at places like Dover and near Calais on the British side, right? They can fire at you because they're not going to be moving, and that's what they're for, coastal artillery. If you get near the coast, they can shoot at you.
Side mission. But when the Führer heard about this option, his interest was piqued, much to Ritter's dismay. As bold as it sounded, Hitler doubted that the British would be able to react quickly enough and concentrate enough naval vessels and aircraft to thwart the Germans' plans. As was often the case, once the Führer was fixated on an idea, there was no turning back. The command and the operational details were entrusted to the Vice Admiral Otto Zieliaks, who devised a plan for this reckless mission. The battle group was to secretly leave Brest under the cover of darkness, to pass through the most dangerous part of the channel, the Straits of Dover, in daylight, hoping to catch the British off guard. The preparations were performed in the utmost secrecy. Even the majority of the crew aboard the German vessels were oblivious to their actual destination.
So he's been given orders that are lunatic, but he's like, okay, well, if we're doing lunacy, let me try to do this. Why do you sail out at night? If you sail out at night here, he points out a very good fact. You sail out at night means their aircraft have less detection range, radar, all of that stuff. They can't see you, more or less. Like, it's going to be hard, okay? Harder than sailing out in broad daylight. So they're going to do night. He says they will estimate to get to the Straits of Dover here in broad daylight. That means when the British are waking up, they're going to see battleships in the English Channel and be like, oh my God. Which means if they send the oh my God message to the capital ships that are going to be based in Scapa Flow, they can't intercept them in time if they're here and they're found out here, which is where they're planning to be found out here, right? Coastal guns, Dawn, everything. They're going to be found out, and hopefully it's here, and then they can push on through. But they still have mines, aircraft, ships, torpedo boats, everything against them.
The loading of some tropical equipment and uniforms helped to spread the deception and fuel the rumors that the battle group was preparing to steam south, possibly along the West African coast. The preparations were completed by February 1941, and the Germans waited for opportune bad weather conditions to start the mission. In the evening of the 11th of February, Admiral Zieliaks hoisted his flag aboard the Scharnhorst, preparing for their departure. Shortly before midnight, the three warships weighed anchor and, with an escort of 6 destroyers, sailed out of the port of Brest. It should be taken into account that the British were not completely oblivious to the German plans, thanks to the Enigma codebreakers at Bletchley Park, who were able to decode a good portion of the enemy's communication. In fact, the British Admiralty were not only aware that the German battleships would soon leave Brest, but also had a plan in the case of an enemy attempt to pass through the English Channel. Yet, scarcely anyone in the British command expected such a bold move from the Kriegsmarine.
Now that's the thing, right? They had a plan. They even knew they were sitting out. They just didn't expect them to do lunacy, right? This is the same thing Hannibal did to Caesar, or Hannibal, no, not to Caesar, but Hannibal did to the Romans, right? He went through the Alpines. Everyone's like, that's impossible. You will lose like everyone doing so. And he did lose everyone mostly, and then came down the mountains and destroyed them, right? It's like the most impossible option, right? It's like you're going to scale a mountain just to take it, Or would you rather go around, and take longer? Everyone's like, I'd rather go around. That's the most possible option. Not scale the damn cliff in front of you, right? With the most dangerous possible option. So they go with it. Everyone on both sides think this is insane, right? And the British are also caught off guard because they're insane. The Germans are like, this is insane. Maybe it'll work.
In the meantime, the beginning of the German voyage looked promising. Ciliax was lucky enough to evade the Royal Air Force patrols and even avoided being spotted by a British submarine meant to watch over sea lanes around Brest. Steaming in the dark at 27 knots, the unhindered German group was almost halfway through the channel, passing the Cherbourg Peninsula around 7:30 a.m. But
think about that. Okay, 27 knots. Excuse my language here. They are hauling ass at 27 knots. That's basically max speed for almost all of their ships in this group, okay? The destroyers might be able to go a little faster, and the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau and the Prinz Eugen maybe a little faster, but they're hauling ass through this channel.
Vice Admiral Ciliax kept up his guard, knowing that his ships were moving through what was essentially the British front yard, and the most dangerous part of the cruise was still ahead. With each passing hour, the skies grew brighter, and the morning weather heavily favored the Germans. A thick cover of clouds with frequent rain greatly reduced visibility, and even the Luftwaffe fighter planes tasked with covering the operation as the ships passed Cherbourg had difficulty providing effective air support. Despite the bad weather, the British noticed the increased enemy activity in the channel. Their radar equipment, though often jammed by the Germans, detected Luftwaffe activity, while the Air Force patrols spotted some of their enemy motorboats moving to join Ciliax's battle group.
Now, this contrasts completely with the Battle of Kuntan, right? The Germans are like, we're going to risk it. I mean, he's on the admiral's at radio silence, right? This has already been well planned, well ahead, right? And the Germans are flying air cover for the fleet, okay? Unlike what happened for the Battle of Canto, the previous video. They're already going to expect they're going to be contact. They are no way they're not going to get contact and spotted. So they're like, well, that's going to happen. At least give us some air cover while we're doing this. Now, the British see this and they're like, well, maybe something is going on now, okay?
Yet the British remained unaware of the three big warships crossing the channel and attributed this increased activity as some sort of rescue mission. The German dash carried on. It was 10 a.m. Around 10:30, a squadron of British Spitfires flew in the area highlighted by the radars to investigate. Upon encountering German fighters, one pair of Spitfires dived to avoid engagement, and to their astonishment, the pilots saw the German fleet spread out in a line beneath them. Avoiding anti-aircraft fire, they turned and hurried homeward, maintaining radio silence. Since they weren't looking specifically for the German battleships, it took roughly an hour for the report to reach the Admiralty.
That's crucial. They maintain radio silence and they weren't specifically looking for the ship, so they're like, so the message, is passed low instead of going all the way to the immediate top. If everyone's like, hey, there are battleships in the English Channel, give me some reports on it, then it goes faster, right? But the radio silence thing, radio silence all the way till they land, right? And they have to write the report. The report's got to go all the way up. You can see how this takes time.
By this time, Vice Admiral Ciliax was about to enter the Straits of Dover, surging at 30 knots. Upon
30 knots is basically max speed for them in weather like this.
Hearing about the presence of the German battleships in the channel, Prime Minister Winston Churchill commented, "At all costs, the ships must be intercepted and made to pay dearly for their audacity."
So, for example, this is now like 10:30, 11 in the morning. This is like someone started crawling across your yard while you're like asleep, okay? Then you wake up, and then they are still crawling across your yard, and then you see them cross your yard, and they see you in broad daylight, and they're like, oh no!
But despite Churchill's confidence in British military power, both the Royal Navy and Air Force struggled significantly to challenge the Germans in a timely manner. Out of 32 motor torpedo boats, only 5 were able to venture out into the channel with the hope of trying to scupper the enemy's plans. But this daring attack failed to even put a serious challenge to the outer ring of the fast German motorboats. The power imbalance was so high that after one pitiful torpedo attack and a brief exchange of gunfire, the British were forced to retreat.
And that is important here, okay? They have destroyer escort, they have motorboat escort, they have air cover, they also have the capital ships. But the problem is they are sailing so close to the French Channel that if a torpedo was launched at them, they literally can't. There's nothing they can do. They go left, they hit everyone in the formation trying to protect them because everyone in the formation is protecting them on the left side. They can't maneuver. Torpedoes launched, they're done. Right? What do? Run aground? Or take the torpedo or turn and then throw everyone off. So they can't maneuver at all in this formation.
Shortly past noon, the German battle group entered the narrowest part of the strait, where they were engaged by the old shore batteries located near Dover. Though only 4 9.2-inch guns had the effective range to challenge the group, a radar-assisted artillery barrage roared for 17 long minutes, but no British shell landed within a mile of the fast-moving German fleet.
Yeah, they're going 30 miles an hour. They're hauling ass. No, even radar-assisted, these guns can't even get within a mile of them, and they are static, right, shooting at ships that are hauling ass. But still, it's not an amazing gunnery right there.
Which managed to pass by the white cliffs of Dover unharmed. As the Germans were slipping away, the British frantically sought to scramble any available aircraft squadrons to attack Ciliax's fleet. It was a true challenge, since nobody really expected the Germans to perform such an outrageous maneuver in the middle of the day.
Which is true. Another thing with these coastal guns originally were supposed to stop like an invasion force from landing at Dover, right? So if an invasion force was trying to land at Dover, the guns would be pretty effective at stopping them. But passing through, not the. I mean, they're good, right? When they hit and they have good sight lines, but that's not their primary thing. It's like shutting off invasion. What happened in Norway was kind of a fluke in that. The Germans were trying to run the guns, and the guns hit them, but they were so close to those guns that happened.
Well past 1 p.m., a number of slow, obsolete swordfish torpedo bombers covered by Spitfire fighters performed another attack. While the fighters engaged the Luftwaffe air cover, the swordfishes attempted to fly close enough to drop torpedoes. A valiant attempt, but it yielded no results, and a few minutes later, the entire swordfish squadron was shot down. Though unsuccessful, the devotion and bravery of the swordfish pilots made a lasting impression on the German crews aboard their big modern warships.
And think about that. These biplanes with no... These biplanes were going against an entire German fleet, destroyers, capital ships, everyone firing their aircraft at them. Also, not to mention the German aircraft that are, dogfighting the Spitfires on top of them, and they still try to put some torpedoes on on the targets. Admirable.
For the next couple of hours, Vice Admiral Ciliax was kept busy by an ever-increasing number of hastily prepared British air attacks. But none of these came close to slowing down the warships. Up until this point, the German admiral could have considered himself lucky, but at 3:30 p.m., the Scharnhorst hit a mine and a violent explosion shook the ship. The engines went silent, the ship's 2 compartments were taking water, and Ciliax immediately decided to move to one of the destroyers to maintain control of the whole operation.
And this is the thing, right? Do you stop this operation to save the Scharnhorst, or you keep going? The answer is you keep going. No matter the cost, you get as many ships to the target as possible. So in this case, Scharnhorst hit a mine. Gneisenau and Prince Eugen have to push on. They can't stop. Remember, they were hauling at. They were going 30 knots. They have no choice but to continue going. They maybe leave a destroyer here or something, but that's it.
The group steamed forward, while the mechanics on the Scharnhorst desperately struggled to fix the damage and get the ship moving again. Half an hour later, the repair teams managed to put her back in motion, and the Scharnhorst built up a speed of 27 knots, trying to catch up to the rest.
That's ridiculously fast after taking a mine hit, by the way. So they're pouring in water on the compartments, but they're trying. I mean, this is the kill zone, right? If you're this is an ambush at this point. Like, you were in a kill zone. You have to get out of the kill zone.
By 4 p.m., Bomber Command was able to scramble its entire squadrons of medium and heavy bombers. But due to the fast-moving targets and atrocious weather, only a fraction of the British bombers managed to find the German group. Time passed quickly, and with each hour, the chances of halting the German dash diminished. But then, a group of 5 First World War-era destroyers made contact and focused torpedo attacks on the Gneisenau. The British claimed 2 hits, but in reality, none of the projectiles found their targets. In exchange, both Gneisenau and Prinz Eugen locked their guns on the last destroyer, the HMS Worcester, which soon suffered a heavy battering. Despite receiving severe damage, she survived the attack, as the German warships quickly resumed to pursuing their original objective.
Madness right there. Those World War I destroyers, the reason they're World War I destroyers is because for coastal defense, so basically London coastal defense, the ships near London were dispatched to basically try and stop them. And those ships are AA platforms and, last-ditch ships. Like, if London's under attack, send them. So that's what they did. I'm surprised any of those guys made it out, honestly, considering that they're facing a battleship and heavy cruiser in a channel where they both can't maneuver very well at all.
The British employed an increased number of naval vessels and aircraft to stop the Germans, but all this effort was futile. It was getting dark again, and Celiax's ships were already steaming along the Dutch coast, putting distance between them and the British Isles. In spite of the Gneisenau hitting a magnetic mine that evening, and soon thereafter the Scharnhorst hitting another, by the next morning the battle group reached Wilhelmshaven. The Channel Dash was successfully completed. Vice Admiral Celiax was the first naval commander since the 17th century to pass his battle fleet through the English Channel, an achievement for which he was awarded the Knight's Cross.
Yeah, thinking about the 17th century, 1600, maybe the Spanish Armada. Maybe my history does not go by that far back very well, but that's incredible when this happened.
It was a German tactical victory which humiliated the Royal Navy and Air Force, revealing their flaws and shortcomings. But on a strategic level, the repositioning of the Kriegsmarine's capital ships significantly lowered its ability to challenge the British at sea and diminished its role in the later years of the war.
Now, that's true. As I explained in the earlier part of the video, if you have all of your forces in one area, the British can put all of their forces in one area. Even if your force is tiny, right, in 2 areas, the bigger side has to split their forces. So, all right, I'll read these title cards and then we will get you guys out of here. So, the Germans at Brest used various means to deceive British bomber crews. The battleships were draped with camouflage nets, and a French training cruiser was decorated with wood and canvas so that from the air would roughly resemble the Scharnhorst. Yeah. The Allies will do something very similar, not with ships, but for D-Day, obviously. Patton's famous inflatable army just didn't exist, but was basically just dummy inflatable tanks. In December 1941, the Japanese torpedo bombers managed to sink 2 British battleships, Prince of Wales, Repulse, in the South China Sea. The event reinforced the Führer's view that the Kriegsmarine battleships were quickly becoming a costly extravagance prone to air attack. Again, we did a video on that, saying that it wasn't necessarily that they were just battleships, it's just that they had no air cover. And they had air cover for this, so there you go. Number 3, a French resistance member and dockyard worker in Brest named Jean Philippon provided the British with invaluable information that the German warship docked in the city port. He believed that the German fleet would leave Brest under the cover of darkness, but apparently his report wasn't convincing enough to the British Admiralty because he's French and we are British, sir. Enough jokes aside. So, hope you guys liked that video. Leave your comments below, and I'll catch you on for the next one. See people later.